Welcome to Study Like a Scientist HSC questions, and remember, when you've got an HSC question in front of you, you have to read it. So highlight the verbs, make sure you understand the key words and the purpose of the question. Notice if there are any plurals and how many marks it's worth, and then plan your response. So use some scientific words, decide how you're going to approach it. Are you going to do lists or tables or a method writing or a flowchart? And engage with the stimulus. And this is a stimulus question, so we're going to need to do that, and we're going to be logical, lay out our evidence and our answer so the examiner can easily give us marks, and then check that you have written everything you need to write. So double check that you remembered your plurals, for example. So let's have a look at the HSC paper from 2023 and question 30. So we'll read the stimulus and engage with it and have a look at what we need to do. This is going to be an assess question. So we're going to need to use evidence from the stimulus to decide whether something's good or bad. And what are we looking for? What are we assessing? We're assessing two things, actually: the use of vaccines and the vaccination schedule. So we have to assess two things here. So we'll need to make sure that in our answer we come up with a statement that talks about both of those, using data to respond to that. So let's have a look at the stimulus. Start at the top, read everything. It says that tetanus vaccines, so we're talking about tetanus, this is an infectious disease, so this is module 7. They were introduced in 1953 and they reduced case numbers. So already I'm seeing some evidence that says that the use of vaccines is a good thing. Okay, so there's one piece of evidence. And you might think, well, that's not the stimulus, but it is part of the question, and the whole of the question is the stimulus. And then it says the majority of recorded cases occur in people aged over 65. So 65 and over. So then we have a graph. So read all the bits of the graph. So this is your recommended vaccine schedule for children. So age of vaccination from 0.2. So that means underneath 1 year old, all the way up to 13. And we're measuring the tetanus antibody levels in the blood. And they're showing you when the different vaccines occur. So first dose here, and then second dose, third dose, etc., all the way up through to a fifth dose. And then what you're seeing is that the first dose, not very efficient, but second dose brings the level of antibodies in the blood up to a high number. And notice, these don't go up in ordinary steps, they go up in powers of 10. So each jump is 10 times more than the previous number. So we have a big leap in antibodies, and then each time you vaccinate, a big leap in antibodies. And the other thing that changes each time you vaccinate is the drop-off of antibodies. So you can see the drop-off is quite steep. It does take a little bit more time to drop off fully, and the final dose, it's still dropping a little bit, but very slowly, which is probably why it takes until you're 65. If you keep this line going on and on and on and on, it would take a long time to reach this part here where you're not immune anymore. And if you're not immune, that means you are susceptible to the disease. So that's us interacting with the stimulus. And you might not want to write all that, but you want to be noticing things on the graph and in the writing around it before you get going on the question. So let's have a quick look at the marking criteria. So it's a 5-mark question, and we're looking for things like comprehensive understanding of the use of vaccines and, remember, looking for and the vaccination schedule. And they also want you to reference the graph and the provided information. Okay, so you have to talk about the information around the graph as well as the graph, and then you want to make a judgment. okay, about how important vaccinations actually are. So let's put our understanding of the stimulus and our understanding of the marking criteria to work. Let's have a look at this student's answer. They've written quite a lot, so pause it, read what they've said, check what they've said is correct, and are they missing anything that means they don't get full marks, and if they are, what can you do to improve it? So pause it and have a look at that. So what this person does do well is refer to the schedule for immunisation, and they explain the schedule for immunisation. I think what they are missing though is linking the importance of vaccines to the reduction of disease using data. So they talk about vaccines are critical for reducing fatal disease, but they don't link that to the data in the question. But they do talk about the downward trend dipping below in terms of immunity and why the vaccine schedule is important. So they're showing the vaccine schedule is important to keep bringing back up the level of antibodies in the blood, but they haven't really talked about antibodies. So they talked about the line or the downward trend, but they haven't talked about what that downward trend actually is and actually saying that it's antibody levels. They talked about plateauing, so meaning that the child will be immune and doesn't need more vaccinations. So that's probably good, but it isn't a full plateau. It's a slight decrease and it gets to 65. So I think what this answer really lacks is purpose. So you'll really want to think about, what am I trying to say? And I think you would go back and say, I want to assess whether vaccinations full stop are worth doing, and if this schedule is worth doing. Is this a good schedule? And then lay out your evidence underneath each of that. Okay, so when you're trying this for yourself, that's what I want you to think about. Plan out your answer first and then write it. So pause this video and give it a go.